I will be speaking tonight, so I'll introduce myself. And my name is John Coe. I'm the director of the Institute for Spiritual Formation. And what you need to know about me for tonight, I've been married 33 years, going on 34 years. I got married when I was 6 years old, and we were betrothed. We got married at the ripe, wise age of 19, and then my wife experienced 18 years of me going to college. And so I'll be talking about that tonight, actually. So after 2 bachelor's degrees in philosophy and theology, and then a master's in theology, and a master's in philosophy, and a master's in humanities, then I got the PhD in philosophy, and then I told my Greta, I think I'm going to go get a PhD in theology. And then God redeemed me from madness. She said, "No, John, that's it." My real interest has been, I've been teaching at the Rosemead Graduate School of Psychology for the last 22 years, and now at Talbot School of Theology for the last 10, and in the Institute for Spiritual Formation. My real interest has now turned to spiritual growth, spiritual theology. That's my heart. Tonight we're going to actually apply that in a kind of peculiar way. The other thing to know about me that's of real import tonight, since we're talking about romance, is I have 2 14-year-old daughters. The discussion tonight, I'm going to take a little bit of turn from what Dr. Willard talked about last week. And this is going to be on the spiritual discipline of emotional chastity, opening to God in romance, marriage, and parenting. And the focus really is going to be romance. It's going to be in a process of dating and how we can think about this. And it'll just have some relevance about marriage and then quite a bit about parenting in this. Now, what I did is, I've taught this before to my students. I gave it more thought this time, and as I did it, it came out to, in my notes, 14 pages. Now, that's insane. That could take me a week here. But I did put it out to you in notes. It's 6 pages, 3 front and back. I'm not sure I'm going to get through all of it. We may be kind of running through at points, but I thought, well, I might as well give it to you anyways, so that you would have it. So I want to talk about this relationship between spiritual formation and romance. This is such a major part of our life. My children now, since about 11 or 12, this is now taken almost center stage in their life. And it's going to continue to take center stage probably until they marry. And then I think back to when I was in that romance stage, how it grabbed my life, and now taking that into marriage. This is such a crucial topic, and what is fascinating is in our education, we never even touch upon this. This is one area in life where nobody thinks that there's something to be educated in, and so you're kind of on your own in your own wisdom or with parenting. And there's so many issues of this. Now, we are going to talk about romance, and for some of you, this is just, and for myself, this is a wonderful topic. The idea of 2 individuals coming together to bond. Some of us love to watch romantic movies. Those movies where they keep missing, remember? They missed again. And then at the end of the movie, right? They came together. It's so wonderful. Of course, the movie's over. What are you going to do now? Have a movie on marriage? Wow. Now, if you're a couple and you're married and you watch one of these romances, and then you turn on the light and you look at one another, and then you want to go back to the romance movie, you're ready for counseling. Now, this is, for my daughters, this has really taken center stage. It began at about 11, they're now 14. We talk about this probably daily. And one of my daughters, she actually has a list. She wouldn't let me bring it. But it's a list, and the title says 108 crushes. And she literally lists Harrison Ford, Orlando Bloom, Dominic Monaghan, whoever that is, Steve McQueen, and then the guy in Pride and Prejudice, Mr. Bingley and Mr. Darcy. And well, I really like this one. The Random Fawn in Prince Caspian. It actually said The Random Fawn. Some guy who came on for a second. Oh! When this began about 3 years ago, I determined, because I was starting to feel uncomfortable, and I determined right there and then I am going to wade right in. And that has, I tell you, for you fathers, that has made all the difference. It has been the most incredible journey of 3 years of talking about these things, entering into this discussion. It has been so delightful to watch the bloom of their youth and their womanhood start to come alive. It has just been a beautiful thing. Last Friday, we actually came home from somewhere, and the girls said to me, Dad, let's watch Bambi. I thought, okay, we'll watch Bambi. We haven't watched that in a lot of years. So we sat down, and remember, if you watch Bambi, you get to the summer-spring mating time, and they all become Twitter-pated. Oh, that was delightful. It was one thing for my daughters at 4 to see Twitter-pated, but at 14, they got it. It was incredible. They were laughing because now they've seen this in these guys. Oh, my. This has been quite a summer. We decided there's about 20 youth that they really know one another, a bunch of guys, 14, 15, and girls, and we decided we wanted to make outings. So we developed about 20 outings this last summer of parties, of bringing them over. It was such a great time of gender exploration and discussion. There's such a wonderful side about that. But then there's a darker side. And that's what I'm going to be concerned about. It's sometimes what we hear in therapy, where we see prior to a marriage, a woman comes and says, before I got married, this person couldn't get enough of me. My husband, who's now, he would stay up till 3 a.m. He wanted to be with me. We would talk. I'd say, well, Dick, you got to go home. You got to get up tomorrow for work. Oh, don't worry. And remember C.S. Lewis? He talked about in the 4 loves, romantic love is face-to-face love, right? Face-to-face love is where you want to be in the face of another person. And this woman will say, he couldn't get enough of me, and then we got married. And it's kind of shocking because now he's watching TV all the time. Now he's going back to his work. I mean, he's doing his education. He's totally given to that. I'll be sitting there at night talking to him and sharing my heart, and he'll be saying, honey, it's 11 o'clock. I really got a lot of work tomorrow. Can we call it a night? She's wondering, what happened? He pursued me like crazy prior to marriage, and then all of a sudden, there was a change. Or perhaps here at Biola, here's the story I hear. A young man and a woman are dating, and they're getting very intimate, very emotionally intimate. They're really diving into one another. They enjoy one another, and maybe the physical's coming along, and this has been going on for 5 months, maybe a year. And all of a sudden, she might bring up the M word. When maybe will we get married? Whoa. He freezes. Wow. She doesn't maybe see him for 2 weeks. And all of a sudden he calls on the phone and says, we need to get together and talk. Whoa. And then when they get together, the first words out of his mouth are, I've been talking to the Lord, and and God has, I think, really spoken to my heart. Oh, man. You can see why young women get really bitter at God, if that's what God's saying. Why didn't you talk to God before? Like 8 months ago. The Lord is really just working in my heart. I just think we need to really let's lay low. He walks away from that conversation, relieved. She may walk away and her heart's broken. She's going to feel a piece of hers over there, but it might be reverse as well. Or it might be a couple here at Biola who are really getting to know one another deeply, and they really like one another, and they begin to struggle with the physical, and finally she gets pregnant. And they're only sophomores. And they might even consider an abortion. Or they might consider getting married. Or they might break it up. This is getting messy. Or another couple, again, having this relationship, getting to know one another. They don't know what happened, and boom, they're married. They're married and they're 21 years old. They're 20 years old. And they're wondering now after marriage, my gosh, what happened? What did I do? What took place? Now, I remember dating Greta. We were about 17 or 18, and man, it was face-to-face. C.S. Lewis, I hadn't read C.S. Lewis. I didn't even know who he was. Face-to-face. I couldn't get enough of Greta. Whoa, I like Greta. Couldn't say no. Liked her. You know, now I look back on it, I remember about 4 weeks after I married. I was 19, I was going to Valley Junior College in the San Fernando Valley, and I was sitting on the steps of the administration, and I was like, oh my God, what did I do? I am married to Greta for the rest of my life, and I don't even know what I'm going to do. I'll never forget when we decided to get married. I remember talking to her father and my mom and dad, and my mom gave me a long lecture. John, what are you doing? I remember her father. That was an incredible conversation. I said, Miles, thinking about getting married. Miles is a brilliant man, smoking his pipe, put his head back. Sit down, John. And he said, Johnny, let me tell you about the landmines of life. The next hour, I heard 10 landmines. And you know something? Here's really all I could hear. But Dad, I love her. That was in my heart. That was in my heart. I want to understand this issue of romance. I want to try to find some wisdom. I want to, for those in it, for those on this side of it, for those who are married, for those who now will be parenting others. So I want to begin with the truth. Let's begin with some scripture just to think about this. And the first one is this, and we'll go quickly through this because we know these truths. The first thing is this: we are made for union. We are made for union. There is a deep relational experience with a spouse, if we choose, and ultimately with God. You see, it's not just that you and I are made for relationships. Genesis 2 indicates, no, there's something deeper, right? As it says here, I actually, got the text for you, Genesis 2:18. Then the Lord said, it's not good for the man to be alone. And so I'll make him a helper, in the Hebrew, literally corresponding to him. And then it says in 24, and for this man a man shall leave father and mother, cleave to his wife, and they shall be one flesh. You know, a me and another man are never one flesh. It's me and a woman. And Paul actually, when he talks about Genesis 2:24, you know what he says that marriage really was? It was a kind of type. And it referred to a deeper mystery. It refers to the union that we're going to have with Jesus Christ in the church. It started now, and ultimately we're going to have this where he is going to indwell us and we will experience the fullness of him. And so when I look at a woman or when my children look at a guy, it's not like, oh, you're nice. Whoa. Whoa, yeah. Well, you're okay. Whoa, yeah. And when I saw Greta, you know what that was? That was deep calling to deep. That's what it is. You see, it's when my kid's sexuality is being, blossoming and coming up, you know what it really is? It's a call. Something is awakening them to union. This is ultimately going to climax with Christ, who will fill them fully. There's something powerful here. Second thing, not only are we made for union, but there was an original design by God for how man and woman were to relate in marriage. There was a design for this. And for the man, you know what he's supposed to do? And this is going to be very hard. We'll talk about this later. He has to leave father and mother. He's going to have to leave. That's going to be very hard. Most young men who marry, they really haven't quite left. And we'll see some signs about that. And then they're going to have to cleave. They're not going to have to pursue their interests. That's not the fundamental role as a married person. For the male, it's to cleave. It's to bring the woman in. And for the woman, God said, I'm going to create a helper. For the woman, it's to seek the mutual benefit of the man. It's to seek to help him. Third, but in the fall and original sin, something happens. In original sin, well, we're born with a number of problems, and one of them is, as Paul says, and as Genesis says, that we're born spiritually dead. The day that you eat of the tree, you're going to die. Spiritual death is when the individual is now cut off from the life of God. And what that means is this: you were made for full union with the indwelling God. And in the fall, we're all born with a huge hole. We're born with this huge relational hole right at the center of our lives. And you know what we're going to be tempted throughout our life? We're going to be tempted to fill that hole with something. That's what the Old Testament will call idolatry. We're going to use things to fill the hole, and take a guess what's probably going to be one of the number one things we're going to use to fill the hole with. Another person. Romantic love. Romantic love offers you something of, my gosh, that's the answer. I can use that to take away the deepest loneliness in my life. And so number 4, thus romance in the fall is going to have a tendency towards distortion. There's going to be a tendency towards distortion. The temptation of the man and the woman is going to be to seek their own personal welfare rather than to cleave and to help. The temptation for man will not be to cleave to the wife. You know when that's going to take place? That's going to take place in romance. We're going to see some dynamics where often men will cleave prior to romance, but once in marriage, the cleaving begins to end, and now he's got mommy, and so now he's going to start pursuing his own things. And the woman's going to be wondering, what happened? What happened to that guy who just wanted to be with me all the time? And the woman is now going to be tempted, rather than to help the husband, the woman's going to be tempted to try to meet this storehouse of needs that she has. The woman's going to be tempted to use the man relationally to meet all of this rather than turning back to help him. And so in number 5, gender relations are a good thing. They're a good thing after the fall. But in Christ, we're to do this in such a way that results in possessing our own vessels in sanctification and honor. I'm going to read this text. This is 1 Thessalonians 4:3. This is kind of where we're going to be parking for the night. To how to actually give myself to this training now. It says, "For this is the will of God, your sanctification, that you abstain from sexual immorality, that each of you know how to possess his own vessel," right, his own person, "in sanctification and honor, not in lustful passion like the Gentiles who do not know God." And so the question we're going to ask is, given this capacity that we have for union, but given also the temptation that we're going to have to try to use the other to meet this deepest of need that only God could meet, how do we possess our vessel in sanctification and honor? I'm going to start in Roman numeral 2. This is what the ancient spiritual writers said. This is a little bit what Dr. Willard was talking about last time. This is the spiritual discipline of physical chastity. Now, chastity, that word is almost a joke today. In fact, in the 5-6 years I was at UC Irvine getting my doctorate and master's degree, I don't think I ever heard anybody using the word chastity, except maybe as a joke. That is almost like an impossible word in our society now. Here's what the ancients thought of it as. It's the habit of body and spirit. It's the habit of the whole person, the soul, whereby we constrain our good and natural bodily sexual appetite. We constrain it in order to channel that energy for relational work with God and others, which is the fountain or source of sexual bliss. And so the ancients said, well, how do we possess our vessel in sanctification and honor? Well, let's constrain this. Let's constrain it, and let's work on something else that is actually going to prepare us for the marital experience, for the sexual experience. Now, I'm not going to talk about this tonight, but I encourage you to do that. And if you do it, you know what you might discover, like all spiritual disciplines? You might discover, if you're constraining yourself, you might discover that I don't want to constrain myself. I like to engage in sexuality. And you know something? That's a good thing to know about your heart. Because now you have a real conversation with God. Because that's what's really going on. And maybe a real conversation with somebody else. There's two kinds of lusts. One of them Dr. Willard talked about. The other one I'm going to talk about tonight. The first one is this. It's a purely sensual or non-relational lust. This is when the physical desire for sexual stimulation is done outside the dynamics of a relationship, in which the, quote, partner of sexual satisfaction becomes an object of use. This would be like random multiple dating, just for the sake of sexuality. I don't care who the person is. This would be, of course, pornography. And Willard addressed this. I'm interested in the second one, because this has to do with some of the issues of the first scenarios I brought up. And this is what I might call relational or romantic lust. That is, this is the lust that occurs in a relationship. It's when the physical desire for sexual union is merely naturally catching up with the emotional intimacy and union that has already developed prior to a covenant commitment in marriage. Back to the students who are here at Biola, and they're getting to know one another so deeply, and now they're struggling sexually as well. Or they might even, go to a place, a nice, beautiful, romantic place, and God, we're really struggling sexually. Let's pray about this. Whoa, this is tough. And so I say this, if you're in a deep relationship, this is for the ones who aren't married here. If you're in a deep relationship with somebody and you're struggling sexually, I don't think the problem is physical. It's emotional. It means that you're emotionally moving too fast. You're emotionally setting yourself up for some problem in the long run. And so what I want to talk about tonight is Roman numeral 3. The spiritual discipline of emotional chastity. The spiritual discipline of relational chastity. What is this? It's the habit of the whole person. It's the habit of the body and spirit, whereby we constrain our good and natural relational capacity for emotional union. See, we have this capacity for emotional union. We have capacity not just to sexually bond, we have the capacity for the deep calling to deep, where I can emotionally bond with another woman. My daughters are going to emotionally bond with another man, and we constrain that with the opposite sex in order to channel that energy for deepening healthy, legitimate relations with Christ and others, and for advancing in wisdom in choosing and opening to a mate in God, which is going to be the fountain for emotional intimacy in the future. Now, this is going to be very difficult, because there are some of you I know who are already experiencing deep emotional relationships, but you're not sure at all you want to marry or that this is the person. And you might hear this and discover, well, let's try this. And as you try it, you might discover, I don't like this. I miss him. I long for him. I long for her. I long for somebody. I mean, who does this today? If I shared this on campus at UCI, they would think I was nuts. Today we tend to think, no, become more emotionally intimate. Go deeper prior to marriage. Plummet the depths of the other person. Because only then you'll know if that's the person you want to marry. And you might as well enjoy it now. But I want to argue that emotional chastity, I think, is going to be a main part of how to possess your vessel in sanctification and honor. It's going to be a main part of how you possess this person in holiness, preparing this person for marriage. And it will prepare you to drink deeply of it. So given what I said, I think now there's a third kind of lust. And I think this is perhaps the deepest. It's what I would call the lust for romance. There's romantic lust, that's the lust that we experience, the sexual lust in romance, but this is the lust for romance. For an emotional relationship with the opposite sex. And here's what I would call the lust for romance. It's the illicit drive or temptation to satisfy our desire for relational and emotional union. I want it now with a person prior to a covenant commitment in marriage, or prior to knowing that this is the person or this is the possible person. It's to just want it now. It's the lust for romance that typically does lead to relational or romantic lust. But it's this lust for romance that it's the heart of things. Romance and emotional union are incredibly wonderful things. But prior to being ready for marriage, they're going to be very confusing things. And so this is associated with a deep loneliness that we have. A deep loneliness where we want to use other relationships to meet those deep needs, and we'd want to do it ahead of perhaps time to really do this. And so here I ask the question, how do we grow to possess our own vessel in holiness and honor, given our hunger for union? But not just given the hunger for union, given that you have a hole in you. And it's not just good to have another person. We're sometimes trying to use that person to fill the hole in a way that only God can. And so how are we going to do this? So I'm going to ask 6 questions tonight. We'll see how far we get to go through. Now, what I'm going to say throughout, some of it will be controversial. Some of it will be difficult. We get some things in the Scripture on this. We get some wisdom. But in Dallas's words, you know what I want to do is I want to potentially give us a vision for this. I want to give us a vision for what this romancing can be. And then I want to look a little bit at the heart of what may be going on that's moving us too fast. And then maybe some thoughts about how to practice emotional chastity in this. So here's the first question. What is going on in this emotional lust for romance? The emotional lust for dating that makes it so difficult to practice emotional chastity. That is, what is in the heart? Think back to those scenarios. What's in the heart of the individuals? I think in general it's something like this. What often that goes on in romance and dating, it's the attempt to fill a deficit need or a hunger for emotional union with someone of the opposite sex prior to being psychologically, spiritually, or circumstantially ready for that kind of a commitment. But the hunger is so deep. I want the other person to fill me. And I think all of us, those of us who married, those of us who are in marriage, this is going to be true of all of us. Because you know something? Ultimately, it is only going to be Christ that can take away the deepest hunger. And so even in marriage, there is going to be a temptation, or I'm going to use my wife, I'm going to use her to take away deep needs, and when I feel satisfied, then I'll distance from her and I'll go pursue my things. And for the woman, rather than really help him, the temptation will be to stuff him inside, to ravage the man. And the man will feel, my gosh, I wish she would get off of me. It felt so good in dating, and now it doesn't feel so good. And so in general, what may be at work in the woman? What may be at work in the woman in romance, especially those who are tempted to go too fast? And so I say in the fall and in a deficit need, there will be a tendency and maybe temptation to use the man to be fully and deeply known and loved, to be explored, a desire to be cleaved to be emotionally penetrated, to take the man in as deep as possible, to be fathomed, in order to meet a storehouse of emotional and relational needs. But before wisdom dictates the time for this, before wisdom dictates that this is the person, before wisdom dictates that we're ready for this, we're going to carry this into marriage. How often this takes place, and then when the marriage comes up, the guy realizes, well, I'm not ready for this. Whoa, I was just tasting. And now he's distancing. And she feels, oh my gosh, part of me is over there now. Or what might be at work in the man in romance? Again, if it's moving too fast, if something's wrong here. In the fall and in a deficit need, there may be a tendency or a temptation to use the woman to meet his needs, but these are different. His needs are maybe not so much to be known as it is to know her. It's the zest that he gets in emotionally experiencing the woman, in wanting to find her out, in wanting to emotionally explore her. He wants to emotionally penetrate her. He wants to experience her and get zest, kind of like a little bee pollinating. Yo! A lot of stuff going on here. A lot of stuff. I recall sharing this in a chapel and sharing it in classes that I've taught, especially with undergraduates. And you know, there's often a line of women afterwards who come up to me and say, with tears in their eyes, Dr. Coe, you know, I've experienced these exact things. I've had these deep relationships, and I feel like part of my heart is over there. And the guys are kind of standing a little back, you know, and then they come up to me, you know, Dr. Coe, I'll never forget this one guy. Dr. Coe, I think in your language, I think I've emotionally fornicated with about 15 women here at Biola. Because I wanted to experience them, and I wanted to experience them, but I didn't want the relationship. I didn't want the commitment. I didn't want that. I just wanted to experience this. Wow. And this goes just with our culture, just to lay it all out, taste it all, plunge the depths, experience everything, cathart everything, share it all. There's going to be a price. And this can take place even if you're not married. You can hunger and long for the same thing. Second question. What are some of the dynamics of the heart that might be driving this? What might be in the heart that's kind of driving this whole thing? Now, I think there's many ways to talk about it, and when Dr. Judy Tenelsoff comes in a few weeks, she may address some other elements. I'm just going to focus on two what I think of as conflicting and mutually problematic dynamics. See, we already have the problem just from original sin, and that is we are all born with a deficit hole. We're all born with something already, and we're going to be tempted to use that other person or something to stuff in and meet the need. But I want to look at two dynamics. These aren't psychological terms, but I call it the Cinderella complex and the Peter Pan problem, or the Peter Pan personality. You know, in fairy tales, these are wonderful characters. Everything turns out all fine. But in real life, these are actually painful realities. The first one about the Cinderella. You know what Cinderella really was? She was the rejected woman. She was the rejected woman by her family and the world. And the real story was she's sitting in the cinders. You know what cinders are? They're ashes. She's sitting in the ashes and she's dreaming. She's fantasizing all day and night about a man who will come and rescue her from being unknown and unloved. Here's some traits about this. Number one, in the Cinderella, there's this all-consuming desire in the woman for a man to come, and perhaps for the first time in her life, because her father didn't do it, for the first time in her life, to be rescued from her loneliness, to be loved deeply, to be deeply known. They're hungering for this. That some man will come and find her out, love her perfectly, plummet to the depths of her, and love her by knowing her. And number two, however, what was a normal urge for emotional union, a normal urge to be loved, is now exacerbated by a deep pain of unlove. Many young women are perhaps loved, but not known by their parents. They long to be known. They long to be desired and to be loved. And if this need goes on in number three, this need for love becomes dramatic. It becomes exacerbated by that relational hold already that's there with God. But now to add to it the pain of rejection, the pain of not being known, and the whole is almost a cavernous, and it's ravenous to be known and to be loved. The Scriptures actually address this. This is perhaps one of the saddest texts. I remember teaching through the book of Proverbs at a Bible study for 2 years, and I came to this text, and this one really was so sad. This is the text of the unloved woman. This is in Proverbs 30, verse 21 to 23. I quoted it for you here. It says, "Under 3 things the earth shakes, and under 4 it cannot bear up." That is, there's 4 things that the earth cannot handle, that it literally shakes the earth to its foundations. Under a slave when he becomes a king, and a fool when he is satisfied with food, under an unloved woman when she gets a husband, and a maidservant when she supplants her mistress. The sage says, I've seen 4 things, and these things will destroy something. In each case, there is some deprivation that has built up such a deep hunger for something that now it is ravenous and it will not be controlled when it finally gets what it wants. Just think about that. He's saying in each of these situations there's a deprivation, there's a deficit, so that it becomes so ravenous when they finally get what they want, it will be out of control. The slave, when he finally becomes a king, will ravage the land. He was pushed down, and now when he becomes a king, he wants to take it all. The fool, when he's fed, has now all the time in life to do his folly. The maid, when she supplants his mistress, the sad here is the unloved woman when she gets a man. The word unloved there in the Hebrew, it literally means hated or rejected. Remember the story? I'll just give you the text. Genesis 29, verse 30 and following. It's so sad. Remember, it says, Jacob loved Rachel more than Leah. And so in verse 31, the Lord saw, and this is the quote, the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, hated. And so he opened her womb. The unloved woman. If this is you at all, I tell you one thing. God's heart goes out to you. God's heart goes out to you just like to Leah. The woman who scorned, unloved, rejected, not considered worthy to be known, it leaves a huge wound. It leaves a huge hole that hardly can be satisfied. This proverb was written for young men. The sad thing, this was a proverb written for young men to avoid the unloved woman. Because here's the sage's advice. that it's going to feel very good in dating the unloved woman. Because while dating, you're going to have this sense, she needs me, she loves me, she hungers for me, she wants me. Whoa, she can't get enough of you. That's so cool. But it's really true. In marriage, she cannot get enough of you. And in marriage, it may feel suffocating. It feels like she is going to ravage your life because now her needs will guide and control the marriage. And the sage says, and this is what we call, of the Proverbs, these are one of the harsh proverbs. Because this proverb isn't for the unloved woman. It doesn't say anything about her, of what to do. But it's for the men. And I think all of us have been affected. I think all women to some degree are an unloved woman because of the fall, if nothing else. What woman has been loved perfectly when only Christ can fill the hole? But regarding the man, this is what I call the Peter Pan problem. Peter Pan problem. If a boy, this is what may be part of this. If a boy stays enmeshed in mommy love, you know what I think of as mommy love? Mommy love is kind of what good mothers provide for their infants. The little infant, might bite the breast or whatever. Well, a good mom doesn't say, "Stop that!" Well, I just kind of lets it go. The mommy kind of allows this to take place. But at some point, the young man needs to grow up. And so if the boy stays enmeshed in this mommy love, and he never develops a deep relationship with his father, so he identifies with the father, with his manliness, and he doesn't grow in responsibility for his own welfare in his life, then he may come to think just like a little boy. This is the Peter Pan. He may come to think just like a little boy in a man's body, that he can have life on his terms. That he can have, just like he had mommy on his terms, he can have the woman in romance just on his own terms without taking relationship. You see, this is the little Peter Pan personality. Remember Peter Pan? I won't grow up. This is the desire on the man's part to experience all the pleasures and all the fruits of intimacy without taking responsibility for the relationship. See, the Peter Pan, and this is where now I've talked to many Biola students, where they have told me, I wanted to experience her. I was exhilarated in getting to know her. I loved it. And then, when it got serious, I moved on. And then I did it again. And I enjoyed it. I got to know, and I found that was wonderful. And when it got too serious, whoa, I moved on. Wow. Peter Pan is a real tragedy in life because it is, and I think every male going into marriage is a little bit of a Peter Pan. He still wants life on his terms. He wants his wife on his terms. And here in romance, he wants her on his terms. This is contrary to the virtuous man. Remember in Proverbs 31, we have the virtuous woman? Well, right before there in Proverbs 31 is what we call the virtuous man. This is, I quoted it for you, Proverbs 31, 1-9. This is the words of King Lemuel, the oracle, I love this, which his mother taught him. Mothers, you need to teach your young men this oracle. You need to model this. You need to open their heart to this. What, O my son, and what, O son of my womb, and what, O son of my vows? Do not give your strength to women, or your ways to that which destroys kings. It is not for kings, O Lemuel, it is not for kings to drink wine. Basically, this woman says, son, take responsibility. It's not for you to just escape into women and escape into drugs and intoxication. That is not what your life is. But you know something? And we'll get to this later. If a mother has a lot of emotional needs, if a mother's marriage is not meeting her deep needs, I think there's going to be a temptation to use that son to meet her needs. And the son is going to feel okay about it at times because he gets special privileges and makes life easy. Eventually, he's going to try to scrape mom off. But the problem is, they're going to have an enmeshed relationship because he's used to having mommy on his terms. And she says, no, here's what you should do. And we'll just skip to the end of this. Rather, my son, rather than escape, you should open your mouth for the dumb. Open your mouth for the rights of the unfortunate. Open your mouth and judge righteously. Defend the rights of the afflicted and needy. She says, you know what you ought to give yourself to? You ought to give yourself to causes where you care for their welfare. That's going to help prepare you for marriage. Again, I think the truth is we're all a little bit of a Peter Pan and a little Cinderella. When I go to weddings now, I remember when I got married in 1975. Well, I remember our wedding, it was just a nice little wedding, In fact, the most frivolous thing was, we lit a candle together. Woo! When I see weddings now, whoa! I mean, it's the full 20 yards. I have some, faculty friends who told me, yeah, I spent $10,000, $15,000 on a wedding. Wow. I can't help but when I think of some of these things, when I think of what was going on in my life when I went into marriage, what psychologically, remember how they're reading their vows? Those vows are powerful. Those vows are high. You ever hear the words of those things? Whew. If we could only have an X-ray machine to see psychologically into what's really going on. I sometimes, here's the man, here's the woman. With the X-ray machine, they may be this tall. And here's what sometimes I wonder if I hear. A little boy who's really saying in his deep heart something like this in his vows. Mommy, please love me. Please love me and let me experience all of you and then let me go and do my thing. And I hope it goes well. And the little girl may be saying in her deep, Daddy, would you please fill me? Daddy, would you please take away my hurt and love and know me? I want to be known so deeply. I want to be known and loved so much. We just need to be aware of the truth. We just need to be aware about what's going on. I have no doubt everyone who gets married is a little bit of a Cinderella and a little bit of a Peter Pan, at least from the fall. And we're not going to grow in a minute. We're going to have to probably go on a journey. Third question. What are the signs to help you know if you're a Cinderella or a Peter Pan? What are some of the signs? What are some of the signs if maybe you're dating one or if you're parenting one? Let me just give these to you. I didn't put those in, so you'll have to scribble these down. The first one, that perhaps you're dating a Peter Pan. So this is for the women. You're dating a Peter Pan, or maybe you are a Peter Pan, if you will not take no for an answer. You're a Peter Pan if you cannot take no for an answer. If you want what you want psychologically. Second, perhaps you're marrying or relating to a Peter Pan. You are a Peter Pan. If the person you feel that you're dating feels hurt or rejected when you try to set boundaries for them. You're dealing with a Peter Pan. If they feel hurt, rejected, bugged, they kind of, what's our relationship? When you try to set a boundary, when you think, this is it, this is as far as right now, and they keep pushing, you have a little boy. You have a little boy who's saying, Mommy, no, Mommy, I want that. No, Mommy, I got to have that. And I got to have it now. Third, you are a Peter Pan or dating one if the person wants to experience all of you now. if he wants to experience all of you now, but shies away from talking about issues of responsibility, marriage, the future. If you have someone who just loves, wants to enjoy you and experience you and keeps moving in that direction, but whenever you've talked about something of the future or responsibility, where's this going? He steers the conversation another way. You've got a Peter Pan. That Peter Pan says, Mommy, I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to talk about that. This is really sad. Then you know to some degree you're dating a little boy. And you are going to have to, I'm speaking to you women now, you are going to have to learn to say no. And you are going to have to learn to set boundaries. And you're going to have to learn to teach him, perhaps, how to hear no. Let me say this to you women. Dating a Peter Pan may be very fun. Whee! Phoo! He wants to carry you away. You know something? It may be fun now. But the habits of heart that he's developing now are not the habits of heart that will come into marriage to care for your welfare. Signs of a Cinderella. Again, this is to men, this is to women, whether I'm a Cinderella, to parents. Number one, you know you're dating a Cinderella to some degree. Here's the first. If she cannot say no emotionally or physically to you. If she can't say no because her hunger is so deep. She wants it now. She wants someone to explore her. She wants someone to finally know her in the deep. And now, in that case, her hunger for you and to be known and loved is so great that she has these overly permeable boundaries. She's lost self-respect because she has such a need. She just wants you to come right in. Second, perhaps there's a Cinderella there. If she wants you all the time and is possessive, but possessive ahead of what your stated commitments have been. Now hear this. It's when she wants you all the time and is possessive, but it's ahead of what your stated commitments have been. You may feel, whoa, we haven't even gone there yet. She wants me all the time. She's jealous if I'm not with her every moment. We haven't even talked about this. Whoa. In that case, she's moving. She's moving fast because her needs are moving fast. A third point. Perhaps a Cinderella, if she is willing to give of herself to you more than you have even openly declared of your commitment to her. She's giving more to you than you even asked for. Her needs are beginning to smother you. You feel, and she makes you feel like a bad boy when you're not giving, when you're not around. Let me just say, this may feel good in dating because it may feel to you, whoa, she likes me. Whoa, she can't get enough of me. That's exactly it. She can't get enough of you. And in marriage, she cannot get enough. The whole is great now. And in marriage, you will feel, that's the whole Proverbs, you will feel ravaged by her needs. And you'll wonder, is she ever going to help me so that we can become what we were going to become? No, her needs will cause the marriage to park on her needs. These are hard things. A fourth question, just moving along. What are some of the causes or influences in this lust for romance? How did it get there? Well, I think the first one is, it's endemic to all of us. And it's the tension between, on the one hand, we're created in God's image, longing for union. And on the other hand, we're born in original sin. As you can see that little diagram there, I'm created in the image of God. I'm made for relationships in union. I'm made to explore this. I am made, when I saw Greta, whoa, yeah, not you. Whoa, there's Greta. Someone more like Greta. Yeah, deep calling to deep. Let's go. Whoa. Yeah, I'm made for that. I think that was one of the funnest times of my life. That was exhilarating. Greta was the only person I ever, quote, dated. I'm really thankful. Because I could have easily been a little pollinator. Because I love Greta. It was like, whoa, girls, I discovered them. There's not just football. There's girls too. Wow. That was powerful. But on the other hand, I'm born in spiritual death, what we call existential loneliness. Now, that doesn't mean everyone's walking around going, I'm so lonely. But it does mean this. It means at the core, I was created for God to live and fill there. And I'm born without that, and so I'm using things. And one of the greatest temptations is to use Greta, to use another person, rather than to seek their welfare. You see, when your relational needs are not just good old needs, they're now deficit needs. Now it becomes ravaging. So we'll use this. And again, in the Old Testament, this is idolatry. So we're made for this relationship. I think this is the most powerful. And that's why I think we all are going to struggle with this. We all are going to struggle, those of us in marriage, we all are going to struggle to really turn back, on the one hand, for the man to not pursue IBM as hard, but to pursue his wife. And to really want to cleave to her and to take her in. And for the woman to really try to help rather than just to use him to meet needs. It's going to be hard. A second influence, though, I think, is the way that maybe we were parented, the way we were raised. Now, parents, you cannot cure all of this, but I think you can help a little. Or you can be a hindrance. You can exacerbate the problem of original sin. And so just to talk about this, in parenting of daughters, how can we exacerbate the problem? Here's the first thing. This is how you can create an unloved woman. This is how you can create a more huge cavernous hole. And it's the problem in not showing her that she's precious. If you have not given her a deep sense, if you as parents, and especially you as a father, if you have not given your daughter a deep sense of being loved right down here at the core, that she's precious, that she's valuable, that she's to be treated with respect. See, it's in that context I really think of father and daughter, or a real healthy mother, where that daughter's going to discover there's value here. There's value in somebody to knowing me in the deep, and I'm not going to let just any old person come and storm into my soul. But you can bet, if this didn't happen, this will leave even perhaps a bigger hole. Number two, it's the problem of not loving her by knowing her. You see, many parents, many students who come to ISF, I hear this all the time. My parents loved me, but you know something? They really didn't know me. They really didn't know what was going on inside. They didn't really want to know, how did I really feel about all these things, even the negative stuff, even the bad stuff. They just didn't want to go in there with me. And if we have not given her a deep sense of being known, then she's not going to know what it is to be known by someone responsible, someone who really cares for her, so that she can measure that later on and say, wait a minute, why should I let you know my deep until you're responsible and ready to care for me? Why should I give myself to you? No, you know where she's going to be? If she is not known, she will probably be in a place where she can't wait to get out of the house because she wants to be known. She can't wait to find somebody who will really love her in the deep, to really know her. I just say here a key thing. It is not enough to merely love your daughter or your son. You must know them. You must begin to plummet and open up their heart to see what's in their heart. Third thing, This is the problem of avoiding uncomfortable talk of sexuality and gender. Wow, I've talked to a number of fathers who have now regrets over this. That when their daughter began to talk about sexuality, that made them very uncomfortable. And it made them uncomfortable perhaps for a variety of reasons. One may be they wish their daughter wasn't talking about it so early. What are the Dodgers doing tonight? I don't know if that's going to work. Or, in worst cases, it's when fathers and mothers project onto their children their own sexual and gender exploitations of younger years. Wow, this is a time when they begin talking about crushes. I just want to encourage you, this is a time to enter deeply, because you know what's going to happen if you don't? The child has a little radar, and that child will sense when something's uncomfortable. And if they feel that that's an uncomfortable conversation, they're just going to say, don't go there. Mom and dad, and what's going to develop is a deep belief, mom and dad can't handle certain conversations. And mom and dad can't handle me talking about sexuality. I'm not going there. Well, then you know what's going to happen? That becomes a little secret in their life. Anytime children have a secret place that they cannot share it with parents, unfortunately, you know what it becomes also? It becomes a little dirty. That's almost like the bad me. And you can bet guy issues will become private issues. That's major. Because there will come a time where you will want to have some major conversations with your daughter about dating, and you'll want it to be a parent issue. It's a private issue now to her. So when that begins to awaken, boy, you go with that. I just want to say, I have had the most incredible amount of joy talking with my daughters about their crushes. This is joy. This is joy. In the parenting of sons, I think we as parents can exacerbate the problem if, again, mothers have enmeshed relations with their sons. Mothers, be careful. If your relationship with your husband is not meeting the storehouse of needs you have, don't turn to your sons. Don't turn to your sons and make them a little more dependent on you, because they'll go with it for a while. But you're creating a boy. If you're having problems with your spouse, go to your spouse. Deal with that. That's a lot of issues there. Secondly, failure to bond and be known by the father. I just encourage fathers with sons, do not let the mother do all the parenting. Fathers, you need to deeply know your sons. You need to deeply bond. They need to bond with your masculinity. They need to bond with, wow, here's another male, and he's getting to know he cares about my heart. That's where we need to go. The third influence, it's what I said above, or the third problem, when your son begins to talk about these issues, wow, enter in deeply. Enter in deeply with them. Hear them out. See what's all going in their heart. Don't let this become a private issue, a dirty issue for them. A third influence. We'll take a break in just a few minutes. The way we trained ourselves. See, I think original sin really impacted us the greatest. Our parents impacted us, but now we can train ourselves. We can avoid practicing emotional chastity. And I think we'll train ourselves in this. First, in the case of woman, if a woman gives herself, rather than to God, in preparing her soul, rather than to healthy relations with other opposite sex as well as those of her own sex, but rather gives herself to fantasizing about the man. Fantasizing like Cinderella, someone will come and take away my pain. Or she gives herself to flirtation, to sexual flirtation, to promiscuity. And then what I call multiple partners in dating. You know what, as I've thought about this much now, you know what this strikes me as? This strikes me as a kind of form of potentially training our spirit in unfaithfulness. This is kind of where I've moved in my thinking, that this is almost like a training of my spirit in being unfaithful, that I'm going to have multiple partners now in exploring and flirting with and exploring the deep. Well, is that what you're going to do in marriage? No way. And so it looks like this is almost a practice or training my spirit. Remember Willard said our spirits, by the time we are even old enough to know that we have a spirit, it's already been trained. And so here is part of this training of my human spirit in unfaithfulness. To have romance without commitment. Wow. And for the man, the same thing. If he gives himself to pornography or sexual license with women, to flirting, or again, this is bad to me, to practice uncommitted romance, to just pollinating, to emotionally want to explore multiple women so he can be exhilarated. But doing all of this outside of commitment, then it looks again like he's training his spirit in unfaithfulness. He's training his spirit in the very opposite virtues that he will need to maintain a healthy marriage. And so I say the fourth influence. Now again, this is, you have to think about this one. Dating. Just as I've been, what I've been looking at Biola, dating looks a little bit like an exercise or training of our spirit in unfaithfulness. So I talk about the spiritual vice or the problem of dating. Let me just say this before I go into those. The problem is not being with people of the opposite sex. This is a good thing. I want my daughters right now at 14, I want them to be exploring gender. I want them to have all kinds of places to interact. But you know something today? You know, my daughters, we love to watch these old, movies and read these old books, by Jane Eyre or whatever. Not of Jane Eyre, but of, we've been watching, I remember Pride and Prejudice. They love that movie. And I thought, something? It's fascinating. Today, we don't really have ways, structures, to allow for kind of normal, healthy gender relating. The only time that we have it is kind of when they're alone. And so I thought, wow, no, I want these to get together. I want this. Here's the concern I have. The concern is going to be face-to-facing, pairing off before one's ready for marriage. This is when the problems are going to begin to emerge. And so number one, it's the practice. The problem of dating seems to be it's the practice of uncommitted romance, which experiences the fruit of gender relations. It's going to the depths, but without the corresponding virtue of taking gender-appropriate responsibility for the relationship. And so it looks like an exercise and habituation of our capacity for union in our spirit, but without the proper boundaries of caring for the welfare of another that would take place in marriage, or if we know that's where it's going. It looks more like a habituation in the psychological realities involved in divorce and adultery than in marriage. And so thus, uncommitted romantic relations in dating looks like a practice in unfaithfulness, more than it is in being faithful in a relationship. Training in being intimate with a person to whom we're not even committed with. This doesn't mean there's no healthy way to date. There may be fine ways, and I'm going to kind of talk about these after the break. Here's the concern. It's people who do pairing off, face-to-face, going in the deep, before they know in their mind and heart, I'm ready for marriage. Because it may be that if I do that with this person, that may not be the one that I'm going to marry. I want to move on. Well, I have just exercised my spirit in doing that with a person, not taking responsibility, and now going to another. So I want to think about this. And so after the break, we're going to come back and ask the question, What do we do about this? What might we do?